If we can't get a deal between Russia and Ukraine, where do we go from here? Human Events' Jack Posobiec tells us in under 60 seconds.
I'll put it this way. I mean, there's most likely outcome, most dangerous. Most likely is that we probably get some kind of deal, but one side or the other breaks it by November, and we're pretty much right back to where we are now. Most dangerous is, I think, if we do enter into one of these Article 5 like guarantees, and we find ourselves in a shooting war with Russia.
All right, guys, it is Wednesday. We are over the hump, headed for the weekend. And we got a great rest of the week coming up. I'm just going to tell you this right now. If you don't follow me on Instagram in particular, this might be a good time. I think I'm going to have some interesting content this weekend. Let's just put it that way. And over the weekend, I will post some stuff and then share with you. It's all got to play out, just to be clear. But I'm just a little bit of a tease here. I think Monday's show is going to have some really interesting highlights for you as we get ready for Labor Day. Anyway, we have a great show coming your way. Jack Posobiec is here. He sat in the new media seat for Caroline's briefing yesterday. He's going to talk to us about that experience and where we go on Russia and Ukraine. And then we've got Bryan Dean Wright with us, who is a former CIA officer and the host of the Wright Report. We want to talk about the weaponization of the intelligence community and whether or not we can trust Putin. So a lot to get to with them. On Friday, by the way, Peter McCullough is going to join us for a big Maha update about everything that we've been able to accomplish on that front. So you're going to want to hear that because Peter McCullough literally wrote the book on vaccines. He's as Maha as they come. So I want to get his things. But real quick, before I get to Jack Posobiec, you guys, I've talked to you all the time about wellness and my journey and stuff I'm doing, but like every single thing comes back to sleep, everything. If you don't get a good night's sleep, you can do a million other things and you just aren't going to feel it. One of the things that I did is to change the sheets in our bed because it's critical that you have a great sleeping environment. We switched over to Boll Branch sheets. Oh my gosh. Literally after the first night, woke up, my wife said, can you order a second set? That's how much we both enjoyed them. And I'm telling you, I used my own code, my own money, just so when I tell you guys this isn't like I literally paid my own money, used my own promo code that I'm going to share with you guys, because from the first moment I got these sheets, it was unbelievable. It's like when you stay in a really, really nice hotel, but now it's my bed. Because they're that good. They're breathable. They're soft. They've made from 100% organic cotton and a like soft, breathable, durable weave. I get really hot at night. Sorry, maybe that's TMI. But these things breathe. And I love the quality of them, the way that they feel, and the fact that I don't get all hot in the middle of the night and throw all the sheets off. So I'm telling you, it will totally change your night's sleep. You will feel so much better when you wake up because of the sheets themselves. You can actually get them and try them. I don't know anyone who's ever done this, but they'll give you 90 days. If you don't like that, you can ship them back. I mean, 30 days. Sorry, you have 30 days. And if you at 30 days, you don't know that, then that's your problem. But I'm telling you, these are a total game changer. They are made to last too. So you're going to have them forever. You can go to bollandbranch.com/spicer. So it's Boll, Boll, and then AND branch.com/spicer. You have to use that URL exactly, and you'll get 15% off and free shipping. I mean, hello. I'm helping you out, and I used my own code, so I know it works, but you've got to go to bollandbranch.com/spicer to unlock 15% off and free shipping. Anyway, you're going to love them. Just thank me later. And then there's a great guy who you guys have heard me talk about all the time, my buddy Leo Grillo, who we text every once in a while about stuff that's going on in his world. And he has done an amazing job of building Delta Rescue. It's deltarescue.org to see the work that I'm doing. When I launched the show, I got to know Leo. We talked about our shared love of animals. I've rescued 3 dogs. And then, of course, Leo immediately was like, listen, Delta Rescue is the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. It's not a shelter. We're not looking to adopt, dogs, cats, horses, whatever. They take in malnutrition, abused, injured, abandoned animals of all stripes and sizes. And they take them in and build this amazing facility at deltarescue.org that you can check out in the videos. And it's all done because of contributions from people like me and you. So do me a favor, go to deltarescue.org. Please make a contribution. There's no big USAID grants or anything like that. And then there's an estate planning kit. So if you want to help make this an enduring mission, please go to deltarescue.org, hit that estate planning thing. I've made a personal contribution because I believe in what Leo's doing so much. Anyway, deltarescue.org. Please join me in making a contribution. Without further ado, my buddy and the guy who sat in the new media seat yesterday at the White House of Human Events, Mr. Jack Posobiec. Jack, great to see you. What a big day yesterday. You tell me about your experience at the White House briefing room.
Well, Sean, it's a little different than when I used to first start going to the briefing room, because this guy they had up there, man. I mean, if you were new media, he would just like look right. It's like, what are those guys? Make them hang out in the
did
back.
Not see that one coming. No, I didn't make you hang out in the back. That's but did you just briefly? I mean, I thought it was so cool to see you sitting there and getting those first two questions. Did the White House reach out to you? Had you asked to join? Like, how did that all come about?
We had been, so the White House has been very proactive in engaging with new media. And so this has been something that we had actually been discussing for a while behind the scenes. It wasn't, particularly timed to any specific date or series of events, really. But it just sort of came about because, I usually, I do the show out of the studio, but then the last couple of days with everything that's been going on, I've been a little closer to the White House, so went to the Anchorage Accords, that summit that was up there with the Russians. Then on Monday we had the multilat, and that's when they said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing the new media?" And I said, "You know what? Yeah, might as well do it since I'm here." And it certainly makes sense, and it's top of the news cycle in terms of the stuff that I cover on Human Events Daily every day. So it just worked out.
That's great. When you went to Alaska, did you just go like on Alaska Air, or did you go as part of the press pool?
I was on Air Force One, so I was part of the travel pool on that flight.
How cool was that?
It's pretty cool, man. I'm not gonna lie, right? People always expect you to say, "Oh, just downplay it." It's cool. Of course, it's cool, right? And it's
listen.
I think of the history amazing. Of that plane,
right? Not only that, but I mean, I mean, I never ever took it for granted when I flew on Air Force One. Just it's such a cool experience, and you're right, it's history. So let's kind of move into some issues. You were there.
I'll just add though, the one thing that was a little bit funny about it was that and this being in Navy Reserve, that the NOSC is like right on the other side of the base, and so we used to have.
By the way, which is Naval Operations Support Center there now. This tells you, by the way. So when I got in, they were Naval Reserve Centers, and then they changed them to NOSC under Admiral Cotton, then the vice, Vice Admiral, first 3-star to Naval, and then they've now gone back in the last couple of years to NRCs, Naval Reserve Centers. But yes, you're right. It is, if you've served, especially been stationed at Andrews, it's kind of weird to be like
surreal. It's like I'm going back here, and then when I was with O&I, we also had a support, depot. Basically, was right next to where the NRC is, and so it's just sort of funny, like, oh, I'm just coming back to to where I used to work, but in a slightly different capacity.
It's funny, and this is so off topic, but I think we'll humor each other here. When I first got in, my first assignment, my first NRC was Andrews, where you were, and the idea of thinking back then that Ensign Spicer would someday be looking across the tarmac on those runways and say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to ride on Air Force One," would have just been,
exactly.
It's like, so to your point, there is something so cool sometimes when you're in a place and go, "I can't believe that I'm actually," like, even when I was at the White House, like, I'm in the office, my back door used to open, within feet of the Oval. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I didn't even get to go on the tour as a kid. And like, to be like, my back door now opens to the, hallway where the Oval Office is just, there's something that sometimes you just have to pinch yourself and go, this is insane.
When there's a cool continuity to it too, right? Where you think, I wonder what other, petty officer, junior enlisted, junior officer, which George is coming up the ladder and, is going to be the next one, right? Yeah. And it's we're just here for a little bit of time, and then you pass it on to the next generation.
But it's funny because Caroline, think about it, she was Kaylee's press assistant. And no one I tell people all the time, like, the trajectory of my career was never to be White House press secretary. The RNC guys never get to be on the varsity team. You're always a JV staffer, And so to me, I always thought to myself, there's no way, like when I was at the RNC, the idea of ever becoming White House press secretary was just not in the cards. It just never was. And I look at like Caroline, and someone said, to your point, like, I bet you she's White House press secretary in 4 or 5 years. You'd be like, come on. And it's just weird. You're right. There's so many times you look around at people and you don't realize that you're probably staring at somebody that's going to be very important. I think of that too, like a JD Vance. He'd been in the Senate for a couple of years. I'd known JD. The last time that one of the last times I saw him before he got picked, we were just at an event together, walking around, and you realize he went from kind of random obscurity kind of known to Vice President of the United States. It's just the world does crazy things, Jack. It's
Certainly does, man.
all right. So you were in Alaska. You've seen it all now. You literally had a front row seat the last few days. Just give me your take. Like, I am very skeptical about Putin and a deal. You obviously were not only there, but your background's in intelligence. Like, do you have any sense of optimism that a deal can be made? And then secondly, a lot of the media is going nuts about the president saying the U.S. will have a role and saying, well, MAGA is going to go nuts. And to me, my answer is look at Iran. Look at the president finds a third way to do things that no one sees. So I feel like they're almost trying to bait MAGA, but just tell me what you think of both of those things.
Right. No, Sean, I think you're exactly right, because there's sort of this idea that, Russia has whatever their original plan was. Obviously, that's all been thrown out the window. Whatever the US's original plan was, of course, we're 3.5 years into this thing. And so this is the first time that we've seen the two leaders sit down, which I think objectively is good, right? You want to be able to talk rather than hopefully rather than bombs and bullets and bodies and all the rest. And that's something that obviously President Trump brings up again and again and again. Then you have the multilat at the White House. But the real question, I think, is, and it's going to come down to it, is that there are people in Russia that, okay, it's great. We do the glad handing, we do the slap on the back. The B-2 flew over my head too when they did the flyover, and great optics, of course, great optics, just sort of this surreal moment. And I mean, great in sort of just the magnanimous sort of sense of the word. You never see things like this. But at the same time, when people are asking, what's the nitty gritty? What's the deal? When you get into the weeds of this thing, you start to realize that the Russians haven't really come back down on really any of their immediate concerns. They talk about root causes over and over. They immediately said no ceasefire. That's not something that they're interested in anyway. And something that I mentioned to a couple of people in the White House too is that, when you look at it from the Russians' perspective, they're willing to entertain these talks. But I think it's very clear, and they've been very clear, certainly in terms of their communication on the battlefield, if you want to talk about it that way, that they want to continue prosecuting this thing in a military fashion. And they're more than happy to continue the military side of this if they don't get a deal.
Yeah. So just to be clear, you share my assessment that we're not going to, I don't think we're going to have a meeting, and I don't think we're going to have a deal. Do you agree with both of those things?
Well, I guess it also depends on which meeting, right? Because, first it was going to be the trilateral. Now it's the bilateral, then the trilateral. And so I think there will be another meeting. I'm told that, again, they're really pushing for this 2-week time frame. But I am told that as of, I guess, last night, that it was nothing is on the books yet. I'm sorry. My view is that Putin doesn't ever want Trump there, right? So he wants maybe a one-on-one with Zelensky so he can say, I offered a deal, he wouldn't take it. And then that blows the whole thing up. He knows if Trump's there, Trump's going to force some construct of a deal. But let's just, for hypothetical purposes, assume that we get to some kind of a deal. And again, for just the sake of this discussion, let's assume that there's some kind of agreeable land situation where Russia gets some pieces of land that they've taken. Okay. I want to focus on the security piece, because that's where everyone's like, a lot of people are freaking out and saying, well, what would the U.S. be involved with? Just from your perspective alone, what would you be okay with the U.S. doing if it meant security? Look, this has really been the crux of the whole matter going back to 2022 and even prior to that, because I will say, and I saw this in terms of comments that I get in, emails that I get in, when we heard this phrase Article 5 like guarantee come out on Sunday during the Sunday shows. That just set off an absolute firestorm online. People saying, wait a minute, it's NATO without NATO. What is that? What is that, NATO where they don't even have to pay to be in NATO? What does that mean? Does that mean the U.S. has to get in? And Sean, I will say, though, that personally, I reacted to that with a lot of skepticism because, you saw this at the multilat as well, because, okay, they're all there. They're saying we're the coalition of the willing. You've got the Russians, you've got the Ukrainians, you've got the British, you've got the French, you've got the Germans, the Italians are there as well, the Finns, right? Even Alex Stubb is up there talking about his golf game. And, you hear all this talk, and it's great. We want peace. We certainly all want peace. But the question is, which one of these European countries is going to be willing to say, we will put boots on the ground and be willing to put rounds downrange at the Russian army and potentially enter into hostilities with Russia over Ukraine? And I've said this from the very start, that I just don't see it happening. I just don't see, certainly given the financial, the military situation that these countries are in, Germany, the French, and the British, they don't have the capability to go pound for pound with the Russians over there. Plus, I don't even know if it's in their national interest to do so.
Right. I always read when people say NATO-like, it's what that means. What translation is U.S. pays for everything. U.S. does all the work, and we get to come to the meeting. I mean, that's Europe's view of NATO, which is, hey, we get to all go to a fancy headquarter meeting once a year, and the U.S. pays for everything. But to your point, NATO-like, if a security guarantee comes through with an Article 5 clause that says an attack on one is an attack on all, it doesn't even matter if U.S. troops are there, right? I mean, think about it. In theory, if you're a Russian and you kill a French soldier, if it's NATO-like, you've just gotten everybody to agree to go all in. I just don't think that U.S. citizens are on board on that.
Right. And so 9/11 was, I think, the most famous time that Article 5 has been fully invoked. And so in 9/11, you do see this response of the Article 5 guarantee where, okay, it's an attack on America, but that activates the rest of the NATO alliance to go after the Taliban. Obviously, people know about the Iraq or the Afghanistan war, what that turned into. It also included the Iraq war. But that's why Afghanistan was NATO, whereas Iraq was not NATO. And so for purposes of discussion, it's important for us to understand the delineation here. And so if Ukraine goes into NATO or gets this NATO-like situation, what country is going to guarantee, what country is going to agree to bring someone into a group like that, into a cooperation like that, into a guarantee like that, when they're currently at war with the Russian Federation, when there's Russian troops currently on the ground? And oh, by the way, the timing of this matters too, because you've essentially outsourced your entire military security to the Ukrainians to be able to say, well, we've agreed to these terms, so you can't make one more attack. If you make one more attack, if you step across the line, this is also, by the way, why President Trump couldn't agree to a ceasefire when he was in Alaska. I remember seeing this headline over and over and over. He didn't get the ceasefire deal. He'd get the ceasefire deal. Well, he can't make a ceasefire deal because he's not in charge of the Ukrainian military. He's not in charge of that chain of command at all. Yes, obviously there's secondary effects from weapons transfers and funding, but at the same time, if he agreed to a ceasefire and then the very next day there's a flare up, boom, you just bought it.
I want to ask one more question on this, and then I want to talk to you about Tulsi Gabbard for a second. If you looked in your crystal ball, let's just say November, so three months from now. What do you think? Where do you think things will stand in 3 months?
I'll put it this way. I mean, there's most likely outcome, most dangerous. Most likely is that we probably get some kind of deal, but one side or the other breaks it by November, and we're pretty much right back to where we are now. Most dangerous is, I think, if we do enter into one of these Article 5 like guarantees, and we find ourselves in a shooting war with Russia.
Yeah, I sort of, that's why, for those reasons, that's why I actually don't believe no meeting, no deal, because I think the U.S. in any other scenario gets dragged into something, and President Trump is very well aware. And
if I could just add one thing that I definitely know that's being talked about is the worry that this becomes Trump's Afghanistan.
Yes,
because everybody remembers the optics of the fall of Kabul, the Taliban sweeping in and taking over the entire country, and nobody, for military reasons, for diplomatic reasons, for humanitarian reasons, and certainly for political reasons, right before going into the midterms, nobody wants those types of optics, because at a certain point, and Johnson tried this and Nixon tried this, and they kept trying to say, well, the war is the other guy's war. The war was the other guy's war. But at some point, it just does become your war, because if you're the current administration in charge, you're the one calling the shots. You're the one who's sitting down and holding this series of meetings. The American citizen, the American voter is just going to associate you with that, whether it's fair or not, right? Whether it's fair or not. And that's a real worry and a huge risk, certainly, for the administration, any situation where you do get that direct collapse.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's what I think is in the back of Trump's head. I want to just get your take on yesterday. Tulsi Gabbard yanked the clearances of 37 intel officials. And I feel like between Tulsi Gabbard and John Radcliffe at the CIA, Kash Patel at the FBI, Dan Bongino there as well, that we're actually starting to right the ship. And what is your take on what's happening with the intelligence community under this new leadership?
Oh, and Andrew Bailey now as well, coming up from Missouri, who's someone I've had on.
Hold on, since you brought that up, what do you like? I'm sorry, like I've known Dan Bongino a long time. He's a friend. He's been a mentor on some stuff. I have to say, like when Andrew Bailey, the Missouri Attorney General, got announced as co-deputy director, I didn't know what to read into that. What do you read into that?
Well, so you know what? There's a lot of ways you could take that, and a lot of people were saying, okay, does that mean Dan wants out? People are taking these, some of the comments that he made to like Maria Bartiromo about how it's the hours and how he doesn't see his family anymore. But at the same time, I would say I would take it at just looking at it from the outside. I would say, look, Andrew Bailey, this guy is as MAGA as they come. He is dyed in the wool, and he's absolutely known for going after big names, certainly known for going after big names, filing all sorts of lawsuits. And by the way, getting traction from them, just sitting as an attorney general of Missouri right there in the Midwest. And so what I would expect is that, look, when you put it together, right? The FBI, the intelligence agencies, they're, essentially a national security agency as well, that you've had so much time going back to Obama 1. So from 2008 on to now, almost 20 years, we're just under 20 years of an entire system that, and you've seen it, Sean, you've seen the blob up close, that the hiring, the staffing, the leadership positions in there, it's not just one or two guys, it's the entire building. It's the entire industry, the entire community. So what I think they're trying to do is bring in someone who's got authority, but also at a higher level, because number one, you've got to get people that are willing to investigate these types of cases. We've seen the stuff with Bill Pulte talking about Tish James and these mortgages regarding, some fraudulent applications. One of the Fed board governors as well is also being brought up on this. But
Adam Schiff.
But I really do think you have an issue of who you can trust in there.
Yeah. All right. So just generally, though, and by the way, whether it's Schiff for mortgage fraud, Letitia James for mortgage fraud, Comey, Clapper, Brennan, is your feeling that like we're not just going to get people's hopes up, but something's going to happen?
Oh, indictments. I mean, that's been the main thing that people are talking about. Grand juries have already been impaneled. As far as I've reported, and on Human Events we talked about. And in fact, Florida has been mentioned as a potential venue for this because of the fact that with a DC jury pool, a DC jury is never, and I sat in all of the trials. I reported on a trial for Stone and Bannon and Flynn when he had his deal and he was, trying to get out of his deal and they wouldn't let him out of his deal and all the rest of it. I mean, these juries, they're just dyed in the wool. And I think even with the Gen 6ers, they had a 100% conviction rate. So, a DC jury, 93% Democrat district, you're not going to get a jury that's going to convict anyone with a D next to their name or if it's associated with the Democrats like a James Comey. So that's why you've got to move it out of that venue so that you can get some fair semblance of actual impartiality from a jury. That's number one. But number two, and I've talked about this for a year now, that, this isn't going, this is what I said to the White House, that it's not about retribution. It's not about revenge. It's not about any of these things. It's the simple matter of if they can get away with everything that they did to Trump, then they'll do it again. And, and whether that's a Vance or whoever else, right, is running for president. And I'm sure there's a great bench on the Republican side right now. And the Democrats, I feel bad for them having to pretend like Gavin Newsom is like a hotshot candidate. But that's why they did all this to Trump in the first place, because he was a rock star and they're terrified of him. So they've got to lay out this lawfare. And if they can get away with it without any consequences, they will absolutely do it again. It's like with my kids, right? It's like when you're raising kids and if you don't correct them and then make them pay some kind of price, like you got to sit on timeout. You got to clean up what you did. You got to do some extra chores. Now we've righted it, right? Now we've balanced things out. they'll just do it again because they won't get the necessary consequences for their actions. And they'll think that, okay, I can get away with it and dad won't be too mad.
100% correct. Well, that's why I love this, because it is rooting it all out. It's exposing it. I think this is so consequential. Jack, thanks for sharing your time with us. Thanks for the question. It was great. The thing that was so funny is they make a lot of who sits in that seat and what they asked. I thought your questions yesterday were spot on, very timely. It was great because that question would not have come from the press room if it wasn't for you. So I appreciate you sharing your time with us, and thanks for everything you guys are doing at Human Events.
Appreciate it, Sean. God bless.
All right, you too. Thanks. Amazing. It's such great insight from Jack. Now I want to kind of go down a different rabbit hole with Bryan Dean Wright. He is a former CIA operative. He's the host of the Wright Report about what's going on in those intelligence agencies and whether or not there is hope for this Russia war. Take a listen. Bryan, thanks for joining us. I want to get into this big bombshell yesterday that Tulsi Gabbard put out. But before I do that, I've been talking a lot about Russia and Putin. And he's a former KGB officer. There's a lot of discussion about, how he goes into meetings, how he manipulates things. What advice would you give the White House in terms of negotiating with a guy like this with his training?
He's a trained liar. So whatever the man says, those are nice words, but those have to be followed up by actions. So, and that's true, by the way, of working with guys from the CIA. You're a trained liar. You flip the switch on and off for the mission. Putin does the same thing. So you just focus on actions. That matters a lot more than words. Okay. That being said,
I thought he was a little taken off guard when the B-2 flew above him. Not that he's not seen a B-2, but it sort of was... I mean, for obvious reasons, I thought it was a flex by Trump in the White House to be like, hey, dude, here's that plane that dropped the bomb in Iran. Does any of that matter? I mean, I kind of thought, nice job, guys. But there's a lot of people who go, that doesn't rattle a KGB officer.
It was a message, and he got it. It did rattle him. Physically, you saw it. And everybody back in Moscow, I promise you, got the message. Look, part of this with an SVR officer, an intel officer, it's the optics. They watch it. They pay attention to it. The little details matter. So absolutely, I think it was an important step by the White House to demonstrate to Putin, look, you're dealing with an equal, if not somebody who's superior to you, and we will flex in front of the entire world. We are willing to break diplomatic norms to flex. So I think you're right. And I think it was actually a very, very good call by the White House.
And then the last thing I want to hit on before I get to the CIA and the intel, there was a letter from Melania Trump about her concern for children. And I know that everyone talks about Vladimir Putin being a stone cold killer and a tough guy. Does he have a heart, do you think? I mean, my point is, the White House made a point to release that letter from Melania Trump. And I think because I know personally how much the president himself actually is moved by images of children being hurt or, injured or malnutrition. He's very moved by those kind of things. And I think it meant a lot for them to release this letter. But does that even have an impact on a guy like Putin?
Does it move him as a person? No, I don't think so. I think Putin is a guy who's like a lot of SVR officers. I'm not going to say stone cold. I'm sure he has feelings. But that message was not only from then the president, but from the first lady, that this is a value that's important to us. And that's what Putin listens to. He listens to red lines. He listens to priorities, our strategy. He wants to know what we want. And so he's a guy who will engage in transactions. So if he knows that President Trump and certainly the first lady think that this is important, he'll listen. But he's only going to listen not because he's compassionate, but because Trump tells him it's important.
Yeah. It's important. You better listen.
Yes.
Okay. So last thing. So I'm sorry about this because everyone keeps talking. I don't believe that Putin wants a deal. I ultimately believe he's not going to do it. He doesn't even really want a meeting. He wants to keep advancing, and he'll obfuscate however is needed to avoid actually ever getting to a deal. Do you share my assessment, or do you think that because of external factors, the economy, other pressure, that Putin would ever even agree to a deal? Never mind whether or not he would uphold it. Would he ever actually agree to a deal?
I agree with your assessment. Look, right now the Russian economy is beat up, but it is not in the state that is of collapse that some would have you believe. Second, we should also remember that President Xi of China, his foreign minister, went to the Europeans about 6 weeks ago. and said that the war in Ukraine can't end because they need the Americans tied down in Ukraine. Right, so that we don't focus on the Pacific and on China. The foreign minister, again, Wang, said this directly to the Europeans. So we should understand the global play here, and that is by President Putin and Xi, that they're trying to reorder the world. And so is he going to go for some sort of peace deal? I don't think so unless there are those other external factors that you're talking about. But that doesn't mean that you can't cajole the guy. And I think that that's what President Trump is trying to do, is even though he, that is to say Putin and Xi, don't necessarily want peace in Ukraine, you might be able to cajole the guy through personal relationship or through demands, whether that be the secondary tariffs that really could impact the Russian economy, especially start cutting that oil, the sales of oil off to the Indians. Yeah, now you're starting to talk Putin's language. That's where I think that the White House could squeeze some leverage.
Yeah, that's what he cares about. All right, so let's get to this big bombshell. Tulsi Gabbard yesterday revoking the security clearances of 37 intel officials is what the media love to call them. Are you surprised by this? What do you think of her actions?
Oh, fantastic. Look, the folks who are on that list, I know some of those scoundrels. One of the guys actually several of them were involved in that creation by Obama that is called the ICA, obviously the assessment that Trump had some sort of colluding relationship with Putin or that Putin aspired to help him. That document that was produced in less than 13 days normally takes 6 to 12 months, but Obama wanted that done in less than 2 weeks. It got done. That document was handpicked, or that is to say, I should say, was written by people handpicked by Brennan, chosen by Obama, obviously. So those are the people who should have never been inside the intel community to begin with. They're clearly partisans. And so I think that Director Gabbard understood that. She identified those people who were on that task force that Brennan put together to write that ICA document, and she tossed them out, rightfully and correctly so. They're partisans. So I cheer that. There are other individuals like Adam Schiff's, one of his guys who has his clearances, who was told by Schiff, per a whistleblower, to start leaking highly classified information to damage Trump in the early part of 2017 and throughout 2017. So that guy should clearly not have a clearance either. So what I think Director Gabbard is doing is the right thing, cleaning up the intel community, getting people back to their oaths, which is to serve the American people, serve the president, irregardless of your party. And you can have whatever political beliefs you want outside of work, but you can't bring that stuff into the halls. That just doesn't belong. And so she's getting rid of the riffraff, and bravo to her.
So explain to viewers and listeners, if you're one of those individuals and you had this stripped, does it make an impact in your life and your ability to do your job or your future?
Such an important question. So first, by ripping away those security clearances, if you are a current government employee, you're out of work. Second, if you're a contractor, they call them a green badger, right? So your government employees are your blue badgers, your contractors are green. You can't go in either every day or on a contract basis, maybe for a project, for a week or a month, what have you. So you're definitely hitting people's bottom line. The third piece, and this is one that goes underappreciated, you can no longer sit on a board of or own a company that's sending people into these various intel agencies, whether that be the CIA, also the FBI, NSA. Some of these people also own or are on boards of companies sending instructors or employees into our special forces schools. So it's really important by ripping these clearances away from people, you start to destroy their ability to puppeteer the deep state. So it's a very good and important thing to do. You can have those clearances for years after you leave government service, but that doesn't mean that you can't use them to continue to do partisan stuff. And so again, super big deal by the ODNI. She's absolutely right to do this, and it really can affect people's bottom line.
So let's just get to the bottom line. So if you're one of these individuals and you're on the board of Boeing or Lockheed or something like that, you're telling me that once that's stripped, you're screwed?
You're dead weight to them because What do you bring to the table, right? You might be able to bring relationships, but you now have a big black mark next to your name. And so you're much less interesting to them, especially under this administration and this president. They're wanting to get rid of you immediately because you are now going to potentially jeopardize their business. So yeah, big deal for these corporations.
Interesting. It's fascinating. I don't think people fully appreciate what impact that has on their futures. Something caught my eye the other day that I thought was fascinating, though. You wrote a piece at foxnews.com. John Brennan was my boss of the CIA. He belongs in prison. Bryan, that's a pretty heavy charge. Explain what your case is against Brennan and why.
Well, I think that the declassified intel that we've gotten over the past number of weeks shows a very clear seditious conspiracy. So understand that in the summer of 2016, that there was absolutely no predicate, and I don't need to tell you this, there was no predicate to start the Crossfire Hurricane investigation into President Trump and any allegations of Trump-Russia collusion. There was no evidence. Indeed, John Brennan briefed that to President Obama, that this whole thing was being cooked up by Hillary Clinton. So it was false. It was a Clinton smear, but yet the FBI launched it anyway. And then we've got this Steele dossier that both the FBI and the CIA investigated. They knew that it was garbage. They knew that it was coming from the Clinton campaign, but they did it or included it anyway. And now we get to this creation of this Obama ICA document, this Intel Community Assessment that can normally take upwards of a year. I mentioned it earlier. Brennan took charge of that at the direction of Barack Obama. He put together, cooked up this document that had absolutely unverified information in it, garbage intel. He was warned by his Russia operations officers and analysts, don't include it, this Steele dossier. He did anyway, he and Comey. And then, of course, they briefed it to over 200 people in Washington, D.C., as New York Times later said, virtually guaranteeing it would leak. Right, exactly. So it was a final op by Barack Obama, James Comey, and John Brennan to destroy President Trump and rip away the rights of the voters who chose Donald Trump to be in the White House. So all that then collectively is a seditious conspiracy. John Brennan used his position at the CIA at the direction of Barack Obama to attack this country, to try to destroy Donald Trump in his first term. And they got away with a lot. And so that is why I want to see John Brennan in prison. He absolutely engaged, based on just information we have, in seditious conspiracy. I'll let the Department of Justice figure out what those exact charges are and how to bring them up. We might get a charge, even as early as today, of Brennan lying to John Durham, the special counsel, about the role that he played in the Obama era. So we'll see, but I want the guy in prison. He deserves it. The facts and the data show it. It's just not my view or my opinion. The facts and the data show John Brennan should be in prison.
There's a story that came out in the New York Post that said declassified emails showed James Clapper's dismissive response to Intel community concerns over Russia election interference report. Do you put him in the same category, or is he in a different category, Clapper?
Clapper's right there, because that email that Gabbard declassified about 10 days ago, he got an email from the then NSA director, Mike Rogers, saying, look, everybody, I haven't seen the intel yet that you guys are saying about this Trump-Russia collusion. You're talking about this potential Putin aspiration to help Trump. I haven't seen the intel. My staff at the NSA haven't seen the intel. You guys are putting together this ICA document saying that it's a guaranteed done deal. My team hasn't seen it. I'm not chopping off on this thing until I see that intel. James Clapper responded by saying, look, I know what the rules normally are. We can't follow them here. And I'm paraphrasing his email. It's now declassified. It was incredible. We're not going to follow the rules. We're going to put out this ICA irrespective. And we don't have time for you to read the intel. You got to just shut up, get on the team, and move forward here, friend, because we got to get this done in the next number of days. So Clapper knew he was in on this seditious conspiracy. And so I think that letter in and of itself demonstrates that. And so Clapper's the same part of this cabal as Comey and Brennan are. And they were all doing this work at the behest of Barack Obama.
You know, there's a lot of people who say that the intelligence community has been weaponized. When you were there at the CIA, do you share that assessment? If not, when did it change and what needs to be done?
Oh, boy. You know, for many years, I thought that I was on the good side, right? The good guys. And look, my own personal work, I'm very, very proud of. But at the same time, you know, I started about 2 or 3 months after 9/11. And we had a guy like George Tenet say, it's a slam dunk that obviously Iraq had those weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. When I left in 2015, 2016, we had John Brennan, who was cooking up intel to destroy a president, Donald Trump. And now, of course, we have Joe Biden and his cabal that was also engaged in a bunch of lies over the past 4 years. So the intel community very demonstrably has engaged in some pretty horrible stuff, and they've screwed up. It's not just that they've done ops and those have gone sideways. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a weaponization of the power to destroy politicians. Senator Chuck Schumer said infamously back in 2017, the intel community has 6 ways of Sunday to get back at you. Well, that's what we're facing. That's what we got to clean up. And that's what guys like John Ratcliffe of the CIA and ODNI Gabbard are doing. Sunshine. They are blasting those places with sunshine, declassifying stuff, and pointing out people's names to hold them to account. That's how you clean the place up.
There's a well, not there is. The Democratic nominee for governor here in Virginia is a woman named Abigail Spanberger. She has
Yes.
been elected to Congress. And this morning I was perusing local news and she has an ad on and she talked about her service to the country. And then when she worked at the CIA, it was just about the facts. I'm not sure exactly when she was there, but it just seems to me that that doesn't add up. It's knowing what we know now, what you've described to us, that it did have an agenda to advance one side or another.
Look, yes, Ms. Spanberger, I know her. We work together at the agency. Look, she's spinning propaganda. That's what that is. So she's trying to tell everybody that when she was there or under, say, Democrat leadership, it was just about facts and data and logic and reason. That's a lie. It's a demonstrable lie from George Tenet to now Mr. Brennan and others. So she's trying to basically spin, and I don't think a lot of people want that anymore or ever. They want to hear somebody say, as I just did, look, there are good and bad things about the agency. I'm very proud of my own service, but there are some horrific things that my leadership did in my aim. And that's not going to get cleaned up unless we're honest about that. And that's the kind of leadership that I think we need in Washington, whether it be Capitol Hill or in the halls of Langley. And she doesn't represent that. And shame on her. And God forbid she's not governor of your state. I feel bad for you.
But I guess the question that I think a lot of people have is that is the leadership the problem, or is it the rank and file, CIA officer, FBI agent? Like, are those guys the problem, or is it they're just doing what they're told and following orders?
Yeah, unfortunately, this gets back to your question of, so when did things start going south? I will tell you, when I started to leave, or when I left in late 2015, the Obama era is when I saw a lot more of the rank and file engage in political stuff, right? Put their own political beliefs. I know of an officer who came in who saw a Trump bumper sticker out on a car in the parking lot and wanted that officer fired because they were a Trump supporter. That is something that happened under Obama. They also started to change the HR component, hiring people who, as we now would call it, to be woke. Right. So if you look at some of the CIA's ads for people under Joe Biden, they were trying to recruit people who were CIA operations officers or analysts who said, I'm cisgender and I'm trans, whatever. I'm all these silly things. And they never mentioned mission. They never mentioned the country. So if you hire those kinds of people who never mention mission or the country, but they say they want to work at the agency to live out their truth, and then identify themselves as all these other silly things like intersectional. I don't even know what that is. I think it's a couch. But the point is, they're hiring people who don't love the country, that aren't there for that reason. And so, unfortunately, I have to tell you, it's not just the senior leadership. You've got a rank and file problem. And that's one of the things that Ratcliffe has to clean up, at least at the agency. You got to get rid of all those people who've been hired over the past 10 plus years. You got to revet all those people. The same's true at the FBI, by the way. I have friends who work at different field stations, and they hate Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Hate, openly so. They talk about it in the office. So those are the kinds of people that you got to get rid of, and it's across this government. The past 10 plus years have just become this true deep state. They think they know that what is best for the country, and they're going to do whatever they want with the powers, the massive powers that they have.
It's so funny you say that. I've seen this throughout government, the military, where the thing that was interesting to me as you were talking about that example, there was a recruiting video that someone in the Navy put out years ago, and like 2-3 during the Biden administration. And the woman was asked about her greatest accomplishment on this deployment. And the word me came up over and over again. I did this, I did this, I did this, right? And it was great for me because I got to do this. And I was talking to a senior military official afterwards, and I said, I just, this is so out of control. And they were like, well, you've got to understand that, like, we have to make this a priority because they were, to your point, I can't even remember, they were transgender or something, right? And I said, no, you're missing the point. In the military, officers' jobs are to care for their sailors or their soldiers, right? That's as an officer, your greatest accomplishment is to be a great leader of those that are subordinate to you, that you are preparing them for the mission, that you are making sure they're ready for the mission, that they're trained for the mission. And here is this young officer whose takeaway is me, I. And I said, regardless of what you think about the policy on their gender, the idea that we're having people believe that it's all about them is missing the point. It's about country. It's about duty. It's honor. It's service. And we've now replaced that with, what do I get?
That's right. That's right. I will tell you, right after I started, after 9/11, when my class that went through, class 11 at the time, we had straight folks, gay folks, we had black and white, we had Christian, Muslim. None of that mattered. We were there because we had just been hit after 9/11 and we wanted to hit the bastards back who did it to us. So we were all then focused on mission. We were all very different. We were all very diverse. And that was wonderful because the diversity went towards the mission.
Right.
The diversity fed the operational tempo. That's what it was all about. And sure, we could celebrate our individuality, but that wasn't the point. The point was mission. And that's what you're underlining correctly, which is celebrate yourself. That's lovely. But when you start talking about why you're there and why you're really doing the job, it's about mission and it's about your team. Talk about team success because there's nobody who's just like a one-off hero in these things. It's a team.
But you think we can root these people out?
It's going to take work. I'll tell you, it's the CIA, everything is documented in terms of why and who and how people got hired and based on what. You're going to have a team that triages all of that for years, going back in time to find these people and then root them out. It's not going to be quick. It's going to take time.
All right. The last thing I want to ask you, Bryan, before we end this conversation is going back to the Comey, Clapper, Brennan kind of trio. Based on what you said in your op-ed, what you told me, do you ultimately believe that any one of those three in particular, or anyone else that you can, is actually going to face charges or go to jail?
Please let this be true. Yes, Pam Bondi, we need you to prosecute these people. Look, I think that you might be able to get them on some perjury charges with Congress or Special Counsel Durham. I think that's the hook. I think, beyond that, the seditious conspiracy stuff, I don't know what the DOJ can prove, where they would have to bring this case to have a jury that would convict. It's going to take a lot of work. But I think that the facts and the data show it. I think that the logic and reason get us there. I think that both direct and circumstantial evidence prove it. So now we just need a really, really dedicated team. And I think that Bondi and her team can do it. Let's see. We need it. The country needs it. This isn't a partisan issue. We got to bring these people to justice.
Agreed. Bryan Dean Wright, the show is The Wright Report. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate your service to the country, and let's catch up soon again.
You got it. Thank you, sir.
You bet. All right, guys, thanks for being with us today. As always, you can go to SeanSpicer.com and subscribe for my free newsletter. Watch me on Instagram. And by the way, do me two favors. One, go to Apple or Spotify and just give the Sean Spicer Show a 5-star review. That'll help us so much. You don't have to, even if you're watching on some of the other platforms, it's super helpful. Just download it and subscribe there. Secondly, always join us at 6:00 for the premiere on YouTube, Rumble, or X. It's always so much fun. Thanks for being here tonight. Great show headed your way tomorrow. And Peter McCullough on Friday. See you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.